Hey everybody, it's Christian Buckley doing another MVP Buzz Chat. I'm talking today with James. Hello.
Hey, Christine, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. And for folks that don't know you, who are you, where are you, and what do you do?
I suppose where are you could be answered in a number of ways, right? So hi everyone, I'm James Eastham. I'm based in England to start with, I suppose, as is normally quite obvious once I start speaking. I'm currently working at Datadog, a company I'm guessing many people will have heard of, but I'm not so sure. So if you're not familiar with Datadog, Datadog are an observability company, and I'm working there in developer advocacy, primarily focused on serverless technologies.
It's great seeing so many companies that are picking up more like community focused roles and like end user advocacy type roles and stuff. Like what's included within that, like the scope of your role or that kind of role?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And it's one of my favorite things about since I've only been at Datadog for 7 months, I think, 8 months maybe. Prior to that, I was at AWS, and quite, at least from my experience with the companies I've seen, like a lot of different companies do DevRel very different ways. One of the really good things I've really liked about Datadog is that it is almost entirely community focused to the point you've just made. Like my remit, I guess, is to be involved in the serverless community. And maybe we could talk about what serverless even means anymore. But my remit is to be involved in the community, get engaged with the community, see what people in the community are doing, how are they building things. And if Datadog can help, great. If there's other ways of doing things, if there's better ways of doing things that maybe don't use Datadog, then that's okay as well, right? Like it is community focused first and foremost. My job for sure.
It's so interesting that this space, for folks that don't know too, just that, like, because I've been an evangelist for a portion of my career and have helped develop communities going back into the late 90s and user groups and even my role inside companies has been around building like governance and project management, getting people together and collaborate, more people involved and transparency of the process, kind of all those things inside and outside. And that's a big part of what this is versus selling software.
Yeah.
And then, hey, we've got your license. Good luck to you, sir. And you're on your own. I think it all stems, again, my feeling from helping people like you purchase this. Now let's make sure you're successful with it. Let us better understand. Let's improve the product or the service. Let us also improve the solutions.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually look at a lot of the work I do as that's obviously part of it. Like, there's obviously a big part of it is taking what I hear in the community, feeding that back into the product, helping Datadog do things better. But I actually view it as slightly more bigger picture than that as well. Like, I want to be engaged in developer communities, in serverless communities, helping people build things better. Like, period. Like, regardless of Datadog or not, like if you're building .NET applications and you're deploying them on Azure, like what is the best way to do that in 2025? And like I said before, if Datadog fits into that, then great. If I hear something that maybe how you do something on Azure that could better help the Datadog product, great. Like that's a benefit. But to your point, like I'm absolutely not out here doing the things I do to sell software, to sell licenses. Like I'm here to help developers build things better. Period.
What a great parallel with the MVP program. I mean, what are your thoughts on? Because I know that a lot of people think it's like, oh, well, MVP is like you have to say that about the Microsoft products and be involved. Like, what do you think about like the neutrality of being an MVP? Do you feel like you have to talk about Microsoft products in a certain light, or like how do you do that?
So it's a really fantastic question, actually. It's something I was thinking about earlier today, because when I actually filled in the application process for the MVP, almost all of the content I'd produced up to that point, or all the stuff I'd done in the community, was AWS, because I was working at AWS at the time. I was doing a lot of content around .NET and using .NET to build with AWS services. So when I was going through and filling out the application, I was like, this is clearly going to get declined, because everything I've done up to this point, maybe by the last 6 months or so, was all AWS technologies. And I think that in itself speaks to the neutrality that we have as MVPs, because although most of the work I've done has been with AWS technologies, the value of that is still recognized, at least inside like the .NET ecosystem. So I feel under no obligation to wax lyrical about Azure services, even though they're not, because well, frankly, I wasn't doing that for a good portion of the time that's got me into the MVP program in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and I know that there are, and some people may like look at that statement because there have been, I've talked to two people that went to AWS and lost their MVPs because of that role. But even though they were primarily focused on neutral like .NET, technologies, but it was the nature of their role which conflicted with that and with the NDAs and things that are out there. But anyway, ultimately it's up to Microsoft to decide. It's a bit of a black box of who they.
I do think if I was still employed by AWS and because I applied for the MVP program after leaving AWS, so I fully expect if I was still an employee, and the other way around, right? That AWS have got the Heroes program, very similar to the MVP program. I imagine if you work for Microsoft or Google, you would very quickly get declined for that Hero program because of the NDAs, like you said.
Which is interesting because it's just like we just had an MVP who is both an IBM champion and an MVP who just interviewed out of Oslo, and no problems there. But again, it depends on the role and the technologies. There's a lot of factors in there, but you shouldn't just automatically rule yourself out if you're working with Microsoft tech, but are largely in another space. Like I'm also an RD, so Microsoft Regional Director, and RDs are expected to have expertise in two or more competitive technologies and platforms. Interesting. So it's just very different from the MVP program in that way.
But, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I want to say the person who I think put my name forward for the MVP program, he's both a serverless hero, AWS serverless hero, and a Microsoft MVP. Like to your same point, I think. Yeah. I guess the key thing is being employed, right? If you're employed by one of these companies versus just being a person who does a lot of work in communities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so let me ask though. So you've talked about like the process and submitting your name because you were over in the wrong category. So what was your journey like to become an MVP? Like you'd heard about it? Did you have friends who were MVPs? Like what was your path to becoming an MVP?
Yeah, I think if we go like a little bit further back, so like my background is in .NET development. I did a lot of did consulting for quite a lot of years, and I always had like an interest in helping people learn, helping people do things better. Like I think back to my first job, and it was a smallish company, and I was one of the better people at wrangling SQL. Like this whole system was built on top of SQL Server, and I remember running training courses for big portions of the company on how to do joins. What's an inner join? What's a left join? All that fun stuff that seems really confusing when you first learn it, and now it's kind of just that's a join. So I've always had this like interest in helping people learn and helping people do things better. And as life gets in the way, I didn't do that for a lot of years. But then once I joined AWS, I thought, well, let's use the platform that a company like AWS gives you to start revisiting this teaching thing, this content creation thing. So I actually just started a YouTube channel on a whim, doing, like I said, primarily AWS and .NET content. And I think I knew the MVP program existed at that point. I guess I'd kind of blotted it out of my brain because I was employed by AWS. Like the assumption would be that, Microsoft aren't going to give me access to NDA content while I'm an AWS employee. So I kind of just forgot about it for a few years. I was at AWS for 3 years, still doing the content creation, still doing a lot of public speaking, still trying to help people build better on AWS with .NET. And then once I left AWS, then I kind of revisited that because, well, then I don't have an affiliation to any of the big competitors. So it seemed like a logical time to come back to the MVP program. At the same time as this, I'm writing a book on Rust at the minute, and my co-author on the book is a Microsoft MVP. And we were chatting about the MVP program, what it's like, and he said, "Hey, I can put your name forward. You do a lot of work with .NET. You do a lot of work in the .NET ecosystem. Like you feel like the perfect candidate for an MVP." So he put my name forward. So
that's a great way. Hey, that's a strategy. I know these aren't your words, they're mine, but you could guilt the Microsoft product teams into giving you an MVP. If you're writing a book, you'd be like, hey, my two other co-authors are both MVPs. How embarrassing for Microsoft to have an expert that's also not an MVP. Like,
yeah, I like to think that's what he said when he submitted my application. That's the illusion I tell myself anyway.
Just like, so it doesn't have to be your direct pressure on that. It's indirect pressure.
Exactly.
Go do that. Well, that's very cool. So you've got the site. So I just saw it out there, your YouTube site. Of course, I'll have the links all to James, his various social profiles and things that are out there. Would you like, what's your primary contribution type now to the community? Is it on like video content? Are you a writer? Are you out there speaking at conferences?
So video is the primary mechanism. So I tried to blog intermittently. If you go to my website, you will see there is a blog section that has sporadic bits of writing. And I tried to do that for years. Like I was like, I'm going to be a blogger. I'm going to write tech blogs and people are going to read them. And then I never really could find the time or the effort or the motivation to do that. And then I started doing video content, and I find video content infinitely easier to think about, to rationalize, to create, to edit. Like the whole process of doing video, I just find so much easier than writing. So video is the primary mechanism for me releasing content. Since I've left AWS, that I have started to put a bit more of a broader software architecture, .NET, Azure spin on things. And then I do a decent amount of conference talking. So I typically speak at, I spoke at all the NDC conferences last year, which are obviously quite big .NET, Microsoft conferences. I do enjoy public speaking. I enjoy being on stage. But obviously that's a restriction in that people need a ticket to be at the conference and they need to be in the right geographical location and stuff like that. So yeah, I think for generally it's video. Like video is my preferred method of communicating with the wider world.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny to see kind of the change, and also look at the numbers. I mean, fewer people going in and will read something at length. In fact, I was just giving advice to somebody who was working on an article, a blog post that was close to, I think, 4,500 words.
Oh,
As
wow.
you know, that's like too long for a blog post, period. It is. I mean, that's like if you're publishing a white paper directly to the internet, that's like, no. And so talking about breaking stuff up into, I was like, do you have sections in your article? Each of those would be like a blog post.
Yeah.
But it's even now for people that are struggling to get into video, and sometimes they say, well, what are you speaking on? What are you writing about? I mean, there's your video content. There's essentially your script. Now you just need to come up with the visuals.
Yeah.
You know what it is, but
yeah. It's funny you mentioned that though. Like, ironically, as much as the video content is my preferred like content to produce, I much prefer reading content to writing content, which is I've always found quite ironic myself. Like I very rarely watch YouTube videos. I don't know if I should be admitting this publicly, but I like writing is just my the way my brain works. I prefer reading stuff more than writing, but 4,500 words sounds like a lot of reading. Like I don't like reading that much. I like reading, but that's big.
I think it just comes back to the point of having content in different formats. A lot of the consulting that I do for companies around content strategy and marketing and in general is, it's like you have to have like the same content. They have to have 3 or 4 different kinds of formats there. People learn differently. Some people want to have a self-paced training. Some people want to see it in person. They want to go sit through that. And then others just want to let me read it. Let me follow along my own pace. And there's no wrong answer. It's just, if you only have one type of content out there, it generally doesn't reach all of the audience that you want. But
yeah, absolutely. It's one of like maybe a bit of a sidebar, but it's one of the interesting things I've been exploring recently with using AI. I know it's a bit of a buzzword at the minute, but to try and get that reusability. So I've been experimenting with like YouTube transcripts, translating them to like the draft of a blog post, and then write like so there's still an element of me doing writing in my writing style, because I think you can tell when an AI has written something a mile off in a lot of cases.
Yes, you can. Well, so that's a great way. I know this is a side topic, but it's one of the reasons that I use. So I do write a lot. Blogging is my number one, video number two. But to go in and for content that I've already written, like I'll go in and what I call like stream of consciousness writing, where it's like, just get the ideas out. Don't edit, just get the thoughts down there. There's typos. It's not structurally. I might remember something 2 paragraphs down that I meant before, so it skips around. But I'll put that very rough I wouldn't even call it an outline. It's just that like those thoughts out. And then I can leverage AI tools to format that to say, help me organize this and come up with the structure. Like, what are the primary, if you're summarizing this, what would be that? And sometimes the answers are like, no, that's not what I meant, or it caught on certain keywords or whatever it is. But to get organized and get ideas, but getting it to refactor your words, your content, help you, it's fantastic. Otherwise, I'd pain over that restructuring manually for hours or days and before going back to it. And I can do it in minutes.
Yeah, and that seems like the perfect like use case for me. Like the creative process is still very much yours or mine. Like it's still our words and our thoughts and our thinking, but you're
For
using for now. Yeah, yeah. We'll see where this goes.
I do envision a future of if you've seen like now just forget the name of the movie with where he like the ability to plug it into the cable in the back of your head and download information, not like the Matrix where, hey, I just learned karate in 30 seconds, but more of pull data out, add data in, and storage. Like I think we're moving closer to that future.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd want a direct interface with the internet, but yeah, it's an interesting idea, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. So, so as far as community, so how are you involved? Like, what is the your local community like? Have things gotten back up to speed post pandemic? Are things still kind of a mix of hybrid of in person and in online, or kind of what's the scene?
Yeah, most stuff in the north of England where I am has gone back to fully in person. I can't remember the last time I spoke at a user group or a community meetup that was hybrid. It was funny, actually, the first user group I spoke at, it was an AWS user group, but after the pandemic was like wild. It was like wild how many people there were there. There were like 160 people there, like crazy numbers. Wow. And it's settled back down then. So that user group is, there's maybe 60 or 70 people attend regularly it's bi-monthly. There's a few .NET user groups that I attend reasonably regularly. Again, the decent numbers. Very few are doing hybrid now. Everything seems to be back to in person for the most part, which is good. Like, I mean, virtual was fine, as I'm sure you know, for a period, but I don't know. I find the connection. I mean, when it's like me and you talking like this and we're talking to a camera, like I think this is perfectly fine. But when you're like talking to a group of people, I find it very difficult to. It's just not the same experience for anybody when you're presenting to a virtual. You're presenting to the little black icon in the middle of a camera. So,
but it's also what community are you supporting? If it's people from all over the world that are dialing in, then it's like, so okay, what are you doing for local? And so it's different. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I stream, we do webinars. I mean, there's all this kind of stuff where we're getting out to the broader global community. But I'm happy to see stuff slowly getting back to in person. Things have changed a bit, from a technology standpoint to where we're not. It's just different, and so I know that some groups are struggling with kind of capturing like what is the content, what do people really want now? Since technology moves fast and we all kind of hibernated for a couple of years, but
yeah. I mean, I think the virtual stuff, like to your point, is incredibly valuable for the people who, for whatever reason, might not necessarily be able to make it to like an in-person group. Like it's all right saying for me that I prefer in-person groups, but I think there's definitely a benefit in that virtual. I mean, just a broader benefit in the fact that we all got forced into virtual land and we've now kind of come back to somewhere in the middle. I think that's probably. I don't have any, evidence of this, but I think it's probably been really valuable for like the wider industry, just for give more people the ability to be able to access this kind of content, as opposed to it all being grounded to specific hubs or cities or whatever there happens to be user groups.
Well, great example is we've got the MVP Summit coming up, and are you coming over for that?
I'm not. So I think by the time, I only got.
Oh, that's right. You're like brand new.
Yeah, brand new. So I think I was a bit late for it this year, at least.
But you've got the hybrid option now, which you didn't used to have. So at least you get to participate to some degree. And it's it's tough for an event like that. Again, you like it, like I would never, I realize that you have paying conferences that have some aspects of it hybrid. It's kind of like the MVP Summit. This is like the annual gathering of MVPs at Microsoft's campus. But even if all of them wanted to go, they couldn't. They have caps on how many they can legally have for fire reasons, for kind of all those reasons, and so they have to cap the number of participants. But when you're brand new, you've missed the cycle to be able to even like put your name in to try and attend. It's great to see some of the content, but then you miss all of the hallway conversations, and networking, kind of all those different pieces. And somebody actually brought this last year, when there is hybrid, and this is something I've done with conferences. I try to remember to log in and comment just as an attendee physically at the event, to also go online once in a while and engage with people that are out there on the virtual side of things, just so that they get more out of it. I can say hello to people that aren't there physically, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of a new thing as well. But I think you have to nurture that. You have to encourage people, remind people, hey, there's this whole other layer happening online. So if you're sitting there in a session, log in, engage with the people that are out in the cloud participating as well. But that's a new thing.
It adds a whole other dimension, doesn't it? When you've got the optimizing for a hybrid audience is a really difficult. Like the same with like meetings or anything, like meetings, conferences. Like when you've got some people in the room and some people virtual, it takes a lot of intention, doesn't it, to ensure that the people who are virtual just don't feel like they're completely missing out and they're just kind of observers watching in, as opposed to actually being part of the conversation. Like it's something I've not so much in my newer job, because I've not done a lot of it, but when I was at AWS and doing consulting work where you've got global teams who are trying to meet and organize things, and you've got some people in an office and some people online, and you're trying to collaborate, and it's really hard unless you're really intentional about exactly what you said, like engaging with the people online, making sure they have an opportunity to speak, to get the point across, and actually be involved.
Well, I think where it's worked, and this kind of goes back to where we kind of started the conversation talking about, community management, getting involved and understand people, is that where a couple of events where I've helped organize volunteers for exactly that, where it worked the best is where at the physical location, we had people that were assigned, were dedicated there to be online during that session, to make sure that if a question was asked and wasn't seen, if it's in the chat, the question's in the side and the person's presenting in the front of the classroom, they're probably not going to see that. And so somebody physically sitting in the room, or raise their hand and they're like, hey, James online has this question about this, and then go through the question and read it and talk about it, represent it. But that again, that's a very intentional thing to look at and say, where are our people? What do we need to do to support them to make sure they're visible? We have transparency in everything that we're doing. But yeah, that's the new world of community.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea, though. I might steal that. It's a really good idea to have somebody actually whose sole, I don't want to say sole purpose, their main contribution is like to monitor the online, and that's a really good way of doing it. I've never thought of that.
We had really high marks. People were very happy with that experience when we did this, and it was from the year before where we didn't have that, and people were like complaining, it's like no one ever saw my questions, or until afterwards they felt like they were separate from everything going on. It's like, well, you were sitting online, you were there, but yeah, we could fix that. But yeah. Anyway, well, listen, James, I always like to wrap up. The final question is for people that want to connect with you. Where are you most active in social? Where can people find you? And I'm going to start saying this now, besides LinkedIn, because we all have LinkedIn.
I'm most active on Blue Sky now. I still have a Twitter account. I need to go through and delete that at some point, or at least clean up everything. Let's not get into that. So primarily Blue Sky, LinkedIn, of course, as you just said. So yeah, they're the two main ones I'm active in. There's my YouTube channel, of course, which that's less of a two-way interaction, more of a one-way interaction, but you can definitely connect with me there as well. But yeah, LinkedIn and Blue Sky are the primary two socials that I'm using at the minute.
Excellent. Well, we'll grab, of course, all the links will be out in the blog out on Buckley Planet, and of course out on the YouTube for the video as well. So, and I always encourage people, don't be shy, reach out, talk to the MVPs. We love it when people reach out to us.
We do. Yeah.
Attach a note. Say like, hey, you saw this, or I read your article, or I saw your video. That's always more helpful than some just random person where you can't see the connection. Am I going to connect with this person or not? Like, why are we connecting? Oh,
Yeah.
you saw my video. You're starting to get involved in .NET. Of course, we'll connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's why we do it, isn't it? For the connection, for the helping people. So yeah, absolutely. To echo Christian's got, like, reach out if you want to chat about anything. Then yeah, hit me up on socials.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time, James.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.